Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Please subscribe to this channel, share, like, as well as drop a comment on the comment section. So, our lecture today is titled Types of Diplomacy. Types of Diplomacy. Now, diplomacy is a primary political instrument nation states use in pursuit of national interests in their relations with other nations. Now, in this lecture, we'll study the various types of diplomacy or combination of diplomacy that a country needs, a country may, use to achieve its goals in the international system. In addition, we're going to be treating the advantages and disadvantages of employing any of the types of diplomacy, a nation is applying, with at a particular time. Okay, so now let us look at the types of diplomacy now. So number one is permanent traditional diplomacy. Number one is permanent traditional diplomacy. Now, permanent traditional diplomacy is when permanent traditional structures are used in diplomatic discussions. That is, all diplomatic discussions must involve the state's Ministry of Foreign Affairs through its minister, ambassadors, charge the affairs, protocol, information attaches, etc. Now, the head of government would normally allow the foreign affairs ministers, to make all the pronouncements on behalf of the state whenever the head of government wants to make such pronouncements. The minister or the legislature must also have an input. In case of change of government, this structure is not altered, although personnel may change, such as the ministers and ambassadors sometimes. No matter how radical or revolutionary a regime may be, it cannot afford to change the structure all at all times. Okay, so that is actually number one. Number two is conference diplomacy. Under conference diplomacy, discussions are carried out through various conferences. This is particularly over issues that go beyond the power of individual states. Organizations such as the ECOWAS, the African Union, the United Nations, the non-aligned movement, European Union, the Commonwealth of Nations, Arab League, World Trade Organization, and so on, hold annual summits and extraordinary summits on general or specific issues concerning world peace and security. Consequently, before ECOWAS launched the ECOWAS Monitoring Group, that is ECOMOG, it met, discussed, and approved military monitoring action on Liberia, to curtail conflicts and promote harmony in the war-torn area. The AU annual summits normally highlights African problems with possible solutions. Okay, with one voice, they call. Okay, now with one voice, they call on the international community to resolve crisis on economic matters. Within the AU or within the OAU, now AU, was then called, or was then as within the OAU, as AU was then called, there was no, there was the Committee on Southern African Liberation and Apartheid. There is also a Mediation and Reconciliation Committee within the present AU, with peacekeeping missions and reconciliation committee. Okay, within the AU peacekeeping missions. Okay, so one problem with AU, however, is the inability of its leaders to put weight behind agreed actions. This was the reason why it failed in its peacekeeping mission in Chad, where Nigeria was abandoned, to bear the burden. Okay, now the next one is parliamentary conference diplomacy. parliamentary conference diplomacy. Now, each state constitution recognizes the importance of establishing committees on foreign affairs. It normally debates foreign affairs issues and pass them on to the committee of the whole house for general debate. As it is normal, parliament must ratify treaties signed by the head of government. The inability of Nigeria's Supreme Military Council to ratify the cession of Bakassi Peninsula to Cameroon by Gowon led to the protracted case between the two countries until the ratification of the World Court judgment, by the Senate in July 2008. So the next type of diplomacy is ad hoc conference diplomacy. Ad hoc conference diplomacy. Now, this is a temporary diplomatic format set up by states or organizations for specific purposes, and it terminates after the purpose might have been achieved. For example, the OAU's Apartheid Committee, which Chief Olusegun Obasanjo was one time co-chairman, eminent persons group on South Africa, etc. As soon as apartheid was crushed in 1994, the ad hoc committees were disbanded. Another type of diplomacy we're going to be looking at very quickly is called personal diplomacy. Personal diplomacy. Now, this is the type of diplomatic style where the head of state or the foreign affairs minister sidetracks the permanent traditional structure for personal initiative. This entails diplomatic shuttles and allies traveling from one country to another for image laundering and other matters, although journeys are usually in the company of staff of relevant ministries. The promises by the envoy are made out of his volition. General Yakubu Gowon and Chief Olusegun Obasanjo are the best examples in Nigeria. During one of the diplomatic shuttles, Gowon promised to pay the salaries of grenades, civil servants, for 6 months. The danger in this type of diplomacy is that the environment he visits easily influences a weaker leader. But for the strong leaders, it is difficult. This was why the experiences of the Nigerian government were high, that Margaret Thatcher's visits to Nigeria may influence her thinking, over apartheid in South Africa. However, Nigeria miscalculated because British believes in following the traditional policy-making processes. Okay, so the next one is economic diplomacy. Now, this is the means by which government influences and controls certain productive arms of government in concert with the private sector interests in the economies of other countries for our domestic benefit, which are economic and political. The concept dates back to 1580 when the policy of technical assistance was invoked for the objective of promoting export markets. There is offensive economic diplomacy where a country in pursuit of its international relations with its buoyant economy is not only ready to change the course of events and situations, but also has the capacity to strike first at any instance when its national economic interest is at stake. This may entail the extension or denial of financial benefits, petroleum products, food supplies, the granting or denial or withdrawal of trade cessations, okay, and of course the establishment or divestment of foreign investments, etc. Nigeria, for example, nationalized British Petroleum, that's BP, assets in Shell PDC on August 2, 1979 over the issues of Zimbabwe's independence. The Arab States oil embargo of 1973 was to pressurize the Western world. Okay, the Monroe Doctrine, Marshall Economic Plan, and of course, Brezhnev Doctrine are other examples. There's also the defensive economic diplomacy, where a country that is exploited and objectified reacts violently at its opponents and tries to force them out, rather than succumb to servitude. A country may want to be a master of itself. For example, Japan, China, Cuba, Nicaragua, etc., put up struggles to sustain their sovereignty. This is also There is also the need to restructure the existing international economic order. Thank you very much.